All right, it is 2 o'clock, and so we are going to get started. Thanks again for everybody who is joined. I am happy to welcome you as my name is Dusty Lang. My office oversees the LRBAA, and I'm happy to be bringing to you the 4th season of LRBAA Today. And today's episode is on adaptive risk management technologies. Before we go into that topic specifically, I want to give a broad overview of the LRBAA. So the LRBAA is a broad agency announcement for those that are familiar with BAAs. If you're not familiar with BAAs, then I guess I would kind of describe it high level as this is the mechanism that allows the government to go out to non-government entities and seek solutions, seek ideas from you on how we could better pursue our challenges. Unlike most BAAs that you'll see, the LRBA has broad topics. They're high level. They don't specify a specific challenge for which we're looking for a solution. They specify a topic area that we're seeking ideas for our challenges. The other thing that's very broad about the LRBAA is the eligibility. So fantastically, it is open to large business, small business, domestic, international, academia, FFRDCs. It is very broadly open. So we're really open to ideas from everywhere and are hoping to seek those ideas and innovation and new perspectives. Because we are not defining the specific challenges under the LRBA, because we're using these broader topic areas, we have specifically set up a process that allows for a low lift for the initial submission to the LRBAA. And that low lift is on both the government and on the industry or academia side. So there's 3 steps to the LRBAA submission process. The first step is a white paper and quad chart. This is called industry engagement. And we're just looking for you to be able to introduce your idea for your solution, for your technology development or approach. And then we will take that and let you know if we are interested by letting you know if you're recommended or not to proceed to the next step. So that is the way you find out if we have interest in your idea. If you're recommended to go to step 2, then you'll have an opportunity to do a virtual pitch. So you'll have 20 minutes and you'll be able to present 12 slides to the government stakeholders about their technology approach. They'll have 10 minutes to confer and talk about, what they may have in terms of questions on the approach or what you're trying to achieve, and then come back and have 15 minutes to ask you questions. They will not be able to provide you guidance because we're seeking your ideas. We're looking for what do you have to offer to us. So they're not providing any guidance or telling you what to do or not to do. But if they ask you a question, I always highly recommend you pay attention to the questions they're asking. If they're saying, hey, how would you approach this or how would you approach that? It's something to consider, and it's something that from their perspective, they're looking at as a key element or something that needs to be addressed. From the virtual pitch, if you're recommended, the next step is when we will hit the written proposal. So this is when we're looking to be able to do if we recommend at this point, we're going forward to try to pursue a contract or an award. So this written proposal will have to include all the elements that would typically be included in a proposal submission, such as the technical approach, the cost proposal, and all those pieces. Now, I'm talking about the cost proposal here, but we will talk about some of the challenges that you'll have to consider as you're submitting and looking at funding as we go through the episode today. I think it's also important for me to kind of talk about what we're doing under BAA. We're looking for solutions from industry. We're looking for your ideas on how to do research and development that can get us further towards the ability to address our key capability challenges or mission needs. What we cannot do under LRBAA is things like support services, So theoretically, that is often thought of as on-site support services, but it can also include off-site support services. So if you have the capability of doing testing at your facility, and we wouldn't be able to take an LRBAA submission for, hey, I can provide you testing, you just let me know what you need tested and we'll do the testing, here's our capabilities. This is not that. It's also not for research consortia, partners, centers of excellence, those types of efforts. We're looking for somebody that's coming forward, an entity individually that wants their idea to be pursued. There's obviously you can subcontract if you need to for specific skills or other types of elements, but that's a different structure than a partnership or research consortium. You can't do mature products where science and technology and BAAs are used for research and development or test and evaluation. So it has to be something in that area. It also, the other thing that it mentions in the solicitation, and all of these can be found in our announcement, is developing specific systems. And I always like to make sure I clarify this one well. When we're going out with a BAA, we're not saying we want to develop a specific system. We're not saying this is the system to be developed. However, when you're submitting your proposal or your industry engagement, it's important for you to understand you do have to be specifying what exactly your idea is and what your approach is and how you plan to get there and what the end result will be. Obviously that, as with any contract, we'll be working with you in terms of, discussions along the way, but you should be coming knowing what that path looks like and be able to execute with minimal pieces of information in terms or input from the government, just needing those pieces of guidance from us. All right, so not to end that one on the negatives, so let's go forward with the positives. I am really, really happy to be joined today by David Alexander. He is the Senior Science Advisor for Resilience. And that certainly sounds like and is an important role. David, do you want to tell the folks that have joined us today more about what it is you do at S&T, or Science and Technology, I should say?
Yeah, thank you, Dusty, and appreciate the opportunity to participate in this webinar. Definitely interested in driving the conversation around adaptive risk management, the title for the webinar and the LRBA topic. That being said, you mentioned my title as the Senior Science Advisor for Resilience. Maybe I'll start with, just giving a little bit of background on who I am and how long I've been in Homeland Security, and then kind of discuss and describe a little bit about the responsibilities of a Senior Science Advisor. So that being said, I've been in DHS S&T since 2016, so roughly 7 years, but within the Department of Homeland Security since 2007. So most of the life of the department, and that career includes both working within the components, particularly FEMA, as well as working at headquarters and management, serving as the department's geospatial information officer, and of course now at S&T serving as a senior science advisor. So that gives me some unique perspective. One, the perspective of a scientist. Two, is anchoring that science to operational mission because I've experienced the mission, and therefore I have some experience in terms of executing and on that mission. And then, of course, looking at the management aspects of how do we implement technologies and solutions for the department. In my role as a senior science advisor, us senior science advisors are small in number, but we have some key responsibilities within the Department of Homeland Security for S&T. One of those key responsibilities is to look across the DHS mission space and the science and technology domains to identify shared problems or emerging challenges, and then look to shape those shared interests into opportunities to conduct foundational science and leverage DHS S&T tools like the long-range BAAs and the larger R&D community to develop novel solutions or drive breakthrough technologies. I will say I use the term technologies here broadly, and I think you kind of set the stage in explaining what the LRBA is. And I use it intentionally broadly because those solutions may extend beyond information technology. They could involve new assessment protocols, novel materials, advanced diagnostic capabilities, for example, just to give some idea for folks. In terms of resilience, I then look at my responsibilities to look across those missions and science domains and look at it through the lens of adaptation and resilience. Really perceiving what is the evolving threat landscape and what is the emerging science that can be applied across DHS missions to help us achieve our operational goals around resilience. And that, of course, means recognizing that resilience is highly uncertain and is changing rapidly over the future. And that means in science and technical speak, we have to recognize that we need to look more than just trying to harden our cyber, physical, and social systems. It means we also need to enable those systems to adapt to these uncertain and changing conditions. And we need to realize that many of our traditional adaptation and mitigation and resilience options have a shelf life. So achieving resilience is going to require that we pursue a mix of solutions and interventions and technology innovations, both to more effectively respond to the multitude of the potential risk, the emerging threats, and the precipitous disruptions that we're facing. Now, I will kind of explain now, why is resilience cross multiple components? I think most people easily gravitate or come back and say, okay, so you put this topic together to support FEMA. FEMA is one of many components that we put this topic together to support. Resilience really crosses that component mission space. DHS components face similar challenges from threat vectors such as climate change, catastrophic disasters, extreme weather, and even emerging technology risk. For example, U.S. Coast Guard and CBP are having to operate in extreme climate conditions and a rapidly changing security and Arctic domain. That is stressing their missions and inviting new opportunities for innovative ideas around how to make their missions and operations more resilient. Our cybersecurity infrastructure security agency, CISA, is looking to ensure our infrastructure systems are more resilient against those multitude of cyber and physical threats. So they're trying to build resilience against new and emergent cyber risk, at the same time wanting to increase and strengthen the physical resilience of our infrastructure sectors against threats like climate change and extreme weather. And then there's the social dimensions of the problem of how do we ensure that our communities and society is resilient against these emergent risks, and what is the intersection between technology innovation and adaptive risk management. So that'll give you at least a bit of a flavor of how I'm looking at the problem, how did we start to shape the topic around the problem, and why we perceive that there's opportunities for the R&D community to submit ideas across a broad spectrum of DHS mission and operations.
Thank you. That was a lot. And a small group means you're elite, right? There's only a few of them. That means you're an elite group, right? So you've gone pretty well into this, but let me ask you if there's additional thoughts you have on this. So resilience is a broad term, and you've talked about those in many different aspects. Is there anything you want to add about what the scope is of what your team does in terms of the resilience area?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we look at resilience and pursue a lot of different types of innovation across the different operational sectors of the department. I think what's unique about this topic is we really tried to tease out this adaptation aspect of resilience, recognizing that we're not going to be able to be resilient against everything. We're not going to be able to disaster-proof ourselves against every disruption, risk, and threat. And that means we're going to need to evolve our adaptive capacity. And that's what I think is really unique about this topic, is it starts to drive the innovation and R&D community around what novel solutions and technologies do they have to offer to help us address all those hazards, all those different threats that can enhance both DHS operational resilience, but also could be transferred to help our extended stakeholders, for example, in the community and infrastructure sectors.
So thank you for referencing the topic. I mean, basically, you're doing resilience, you're doing this, and you're pursuing your goals and the scope of your mission or pieces of the mission through many channels, not just LRBAA. And so the topic is just one piece of that. So to that, and you've again touched on, you're reading my mind on the questions, you touched on a little bit, but so what do you see as ideal submissions, or what are you hoping that this topic can more specifically address versus the broader resilience effort that you're working?
Yeah, so why don't I kind of try and hone in on a few areas that we think are key challenges that we would like to see the R&D community address through this topic around adaptive risk management, and then kind of walk into answering your question, if you don't mind. I think we're really looking for solution providers to propose and make submissions around how can we address climate change, no doubt. How can we address environmental degradation and extreme weather events, but also there's other interactions between Earth and human systems. I could give you a variety of statistics and I could talk through those statistics. Most of those statistics are well known by the community. There's more disasters, there's increasing risk. There's more extreme weather, we're facing more extreme heat, more of our mission operators and stakeholders are exposed to extreme heat environments and other situations. Our infrastructure is aging. It wasn't necessarily built to cope with these increasing conditions. And I'll give you maybe an example and hone in on one particular critical infrastructure, but give you larger context as to why solutions around infrastructure are clearly an area of interest within this topic domain. If you take the latest report card on America's infrastructure, America got an overall score of a C-. That's not very good. Now, there's a variety of factors that relate to that in terms of its aging, it's under-maintained, the risk profile is changing, but there are clear issues where new technologies and innovations can help us to address those challenges. One is that we know that disproportionately disadvantaged and underserved communities, are affected by disruptions with infrastructure, and those impacts, are more acute. We also know that water and energy are clearly critical lifelines that most of our societal services rely on to function. And also, if you just take the water infrastructure sector, and I'll give you a couple statistics just for context, there's 10,000 miles of levee whose location and condition we don't fully understand. There's over 2,300 high hazard potential dams, and many of those are low head dams, and we don't have a full inventory of those dams, nor do we have an understanding of which dams are orphan dams and what the risks are, not just to the public, but for first responders. And there's over 600 million miles in streams and 13 million acres of lakes and reservoirs and ponds that are considered impaired. So that tells you that those assets have an increased risk of exposure and impacts from these evolving threat vectors such as climate change or environmental degradation. So that clearly gives you an idea of what's the relationship between risk, and resilience, and why we're trying to pursue more R&D around adaptive risk management. You
Thank
know,
you. So that's, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I'll pause there. There's a lot to unpack that we could unpack just in that 2-minute answer.
Yeah, that's a lot of information, and like I said at the beginning, it's your job title sounds important, and this has only made it even more clear how important this area is. I mean, it just covers a lot that is very impactful to everybody on an everyday basis. So it's really maybe a little bit overwhelming, but I'm glad to know that we have some smart folks like you out there pursuing some technology solutions and some efforts towards the furtherance of the technology solutions.
Yeah. So maybe I'll give a little bit more sense tangibly on what this means in terms of someone that is interested in submitting an idea or an application. So the topic, we're really specifically interested in risk sciences, regenerative technologies, and adaptive engineering practices. Those could be designed, developed, integrated, or you could choose to repurpose an existing technology that hasn't been utilized to support a homeland security use case that could enable more resilience both within our operations or our key stakeholders. We've clearly identified, and I've talked to our interest in getting multiple benefits, right? If it could support one of our core missions, great, but if it could also support communities or critical infrastructure sectors like water, energy, or functional areas like dam safety, that's even better. What types of priority R&D have we considered as we were shaping this topic? There were really 5 key areas that we identified that we were interested in driving that relate to adaptive risk management from a homeland security perspective, and could spawn new and novel solutions. One is self-sensing, self-healing, or regenerative technologies. Think of advanced material sciences, where now the physical infrastructure is not only sensing that it's under stress, but has the ability to adapt to those stresses and the implications that might mean on the future of infrastructure resilience. Risk assessment or planning tools. Think of risk assessment or new risk assessment and planning technologies that now give us a more complete picture of risk, not just in terms of understanding where those hazards are, where those emergent risk and future conditions may occur, but now being able to relate that to how it will affect our assets, our programs and missions, and society at large. Think of new disaster proofing technologies or interventions. I don't like the word disaster proofing. It is a market recognized term, so we tend to use it. But what we're getting at is there's a lot of new technologies that could be built or designed or deployed that could help strengthen different aspects of our infrastructure that could, or it could help nurture new types of interventions that would allow communities to make more informed decisions on how they make themselves resilient against different hazards and threat vectors. And then there's more new diagnostic type technologies, where we may be able to exploit new information technology advances to where we can now get continuous monitoring, which can help us improve the maintenance and the effectiveness of management of our key assets and infrastructure. And then there's the fact that if you want to understand climate change and the risk of climate change, you can't forget about the Earth, and the Earth is changing as a response to climate change. And so there's a lot that we still don't understand, and there's an opportunity for technologies to help improve our understanding around what are those geophysical changes to the Earth, and how do we sense and how do we understand those changes? For example, if subsidence is occurring and it's occurring because of polar ice melt, for example, how can we detect and predict where those high risk areas are, and what kind of engineering changes, solutions do we need to implement to make our communities more adaptive to that changing landscape. So it gives you a little bit of a broad sense and flavor of what those priority R&D areas are that we targeted under adaptive risk management, to give the R&D community a sense of of some of our thinking around where we thought new and novel technologies and solutions could make a difference.
A little bit, just a little bit, David. That's a lot. So thank you. And that is an incredibly that's a wealth of information. And thank you so much for sharing that. I think those are great thoughts for folks to be able to incorporate into how they may look at what they could submit to this topic. And it is very, very broad, which is great. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, and you talked, I think, kind of touched on what I see as a positive, and as you were doing your introduction, you talked about the different areas that you worked prior to coming to S&T and how that gave you insight into what has to happen now to really be able to take something from an idea all the way to transition or commercialize it and make it go out into the field. To that end, you've referenced the R&D community. I want to make sure that we're clear that when we're going out with the LRBAA, and one of the reasons we have this, that it's broad and it's seeking ideas from the community, is sometimes there's ideas that come from not our usual partners. And the folks that we partner with do valuable work. And this is in no way not appreciation for the folks we've already partnered with, but when you can have a different perspective, it can bring value. Can you talk about how you think new players may be able to provide an advantage to also submitting to this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think the LRBAA is a resource advantage for DHS in general. It gives us that additional opportunity to reach out to that broader R&D community and invite others that may not be those traditional players to submit ideas and proposals for us to react to and respond to that might not otherwise have come in to us and could be out of the box thinking because they're not connected to a traditional research a line of business. So I do think that gives us an advantage. I think the other thing that we've wanted to do with this topic is we also wanted to not just be broad in terms of the scope of the topic, so that we could encourage a multitude and more runway to get better ideas in, but we also scoped it to address a range of technical readiness levels. So we're kind of saying, hey, we're fine if you submit to technical readiness level 2, which is really, you're at the true research stage. You got an idea, you've kind of thought through somewhat your idea. You want now to really kind of do something with that idea. You want to apply that idea to the problem that you conceived it for. And you want to work with us on that because it's relevant to DHS and the Homeland Security enterprise. And then we kind of have the top end of the range at technical readiness level 6. We're kind of saying, hey, you've got, maybe you're trying to integrate known technology to use it to address a Homeland Security problem. So you're really more at the prototype stage. You've got technology that you can put together and you want to prototype it and demonstrate it that you can solve the problem using these types of integrated or new technologies. So we've really created some flexibility and opportunity that, one, stimulates some innovation, and 2, provides a pathway into commercialization. And that gets to your earlier question. I said I'm going to walk you into this answer of our end objective for this topic. What we hope to achieve, besides just solving DHS problems, which is, we wouldn't have put the topic together if we weren't wanting to do that, is that we really want to stimulate some applied research and development in adaptive risk management. We want to be able to transfer some of those advances to DHS component missions and their key stakeholders. And of course, we're particularly interested in novel solutions, but even more so in interoperable solutions that add operational value to multiple stakeholders and that have that potential for commercial viability. So it's kind of, hey, you got a cool idea, you got an ability to generate a prototype. You've got to think through, okay, well, if you're successful, what would be next for you? And that gets into a little bit of, what is a good submission? What is a good submission, right? And all, because we want to get to not just solving the problem, but delivering solutions that can be implemented across our stakeholders and sustained by the marketplace. And if you want me to talk about what may make a good submission, happy to do that. If you'd like to ask me another question beforehand, we can do that too.
No, yeah, I want to do a clarification because you make a really good point about that. If you have something, that has already been out in the industry, has been commercialized. And at the beginning, I said we don't pursue mature technologies. And I want to be clear about the fact that we can pursue taking a mature technology and using it for a different application that requires R&D to get to there. So
exactly, right. And that was my point up front of, I kept saying we could repurpose existing technology against a homeland security problem where that technology has never been utilized or exploited.
And I wanted to make sure I wasn't keeping those folks, going, but we have something and we could use it over here. If it needs further R&D for this application, that changes that TRL for that application, and it is now something that we could pursue further R&D or test and evaluation, those types of activities for. So thanks for bringing that up and providing that opportunity to clarify. So I do have a quick question before we get to what makes a good submission, which is a great question. So as a new player, perhaps, and I always make sure folks understand, we want your innovation. We want you to come to the table, but we also need you to come to the table as a partner. And as a partner, you have some responsibilities, and that responsibility is kind of doing your research and your homework to understand what we need, what our end result is. And it can be challenging for somebody that's new to this area or this mission or whatever to really understand the space. What do you have, and sometimes finding the good resources, the right resources can be challenging. Do you have suggestions? I think you provided us with some that we can display now on some resources where folks can start if they are new to this area.
Yeah, Dusty, I think that's a great segue. We did provide a list of what we think are some informative resources that relate to this topic that we encourage folks to take a look at. There is even more listed within those pages. So when you're looking at addressing climate change and you're looking at the department's statement and frameworks around climate change, there's additional links and substantive reports and documents there to help them better understand what some of those challenges are beyond the buzzwords that I've used in the short 1 hour webinar that we have around aging infrastructure and environmental degradation. If you look at the DHS resilience page, it also gives a list of some activities and programs that are underway. And so you'll become more familiar with some of those efforts within the department as you're doing your homework to understand DHS's role within resilience and some of its key activities. We also listed climate resilience. Clearly, it's a key area. Climate resilience and adaptation are key areas. One is, we wanted to make sure, given that, FEMA is a big player in the climate space for Homeland Security, to spotlight that, they have a variety and a number of resources that particularly touch on risk management, but also touch on other aspects of climate resilience. And then climate adaptation, we wanted to put out some additional material that from S&T on some research and development areas and priorities and efforts that we have underway to give you a sense on what we're already looking at. Maybe you have a better idea or solution that compares with something that we're already doing, or maybe it's an opportunity for you to better understand in a little bit more depth and breadth what kind of R&D we're really trying to pursue. And then of course us as senior scientists worked with our division leader in the Technology Centers Division of S&T to put out a forward-leaning strategic research agenda, and that includes references and some key areas of interest, particularly around emerging and over the horizon R&D interest and needs around Earth system science, climate change, and resilience, and a couple other threads, including artificial intelligence, which I'd be remiss not to at least bring up in the conversation, because when you talk about adaptive risk management, assessment and planning, there's plenty of opportunity for new innovation around the utilization of AI in that space.
Fantastic, thank you. I think it's always wonderful to be able to point folks to some place that they can start instead of leaving them hanging. So this is good. So to your point, we want good submissions, right? I always say we want to increase the number of folks that we can reach. We want to make sure that we're getting ideas from the broader communities, again, new players, but we don't just want more submissions. We want good submissions. So can you talk about, for you, what you think would be included in a good submission, and in terms of like the types of areas that maybe need to be addressed, or the quality of the elements, or what you think that defines good submission?
Sure, I think I'll kind of address it more from what you should think of in terms of making sure that you include in your submission to make it a quality submission. Kind of keep it at the bullet point level, but give a little bit of context. Clearly, a good submission will clearly define the problem or challenge being solved. It'll explain and describe what makes the solution or approach unique or novel. You should also be able to, within your submission, provide a clear picture of the solution being proposed and what the outputs, what is the product of the R&D effort going to be, or what is it going to look like? And then, of course, as you move through the process, you need to have a sound approach and a reasonable budget for executing your proposal, your idea, or your concept. Just a little bit more nuance. Of course, the first stage you mentioned is the white paper. One of the things that I always, try and make clear and emphasize to the audience is that, white paper should not be a commentary on DHS. You should be providing some context on the size, scope, and scale of the problem you're trying to solve, but you need to do your homework and leverage some of the resources we shared so that you can better articulate the benefits and the uniqueness of your solution that you're proposing. Don't submit a commentary.
Valuable advice. Thank you. And earlier you talked about a lot of things like, infrastructure and the things that we need to tackle, and there was a lot to do there. And it just kind of made me think of funding, right? So as folks are submitting things, they may have fantastic ideas. And so I want to ask you about funding kind of from two perspectives. One is, as I've talked about in all of the LRBAA Today episodes, we don't give a threshold for the funding for LRBAA, and I think if nothing else from this webinar, you should see the vast amount of work there is in terms of opportunity to be proposed and to be done under this topic. And given that, obviously, not all of the proposals submitted would come under the same amount of funding required. So two things. One, I mean, how important is it that folks are proposing something that has some efficiency in terms of the funding resource that they're asking for? And then the other is just helping folks to understand why there would be an example of something that would have, like, we want this much funding. Well, make sure you're pretty accurate in your first submission, because if you say yes and then it ends up being a lot more, now we've gone down the path that, well, I said yes originally because I thought this would be something, you know, that was worth the funding that you're requesting, but now I'm not sure that that fits within our budget in terms of the prioritization of this need. And hopefully all that makes sense as a question for you, David.
Yeah, so I think first, to be very candid to the audience, is that the LRBA is not a fishing experiment. You know, it is an innovation advantage tool for DHS S&T. So you should be looking to submit credible, makes credible submissions, and a credible submission means you need to have the ability to think through effectively and reasonably what your budget needs to be to accomplish your research objective. Yeah, that's the first thing. You know, second is that we expect that there's going to be a range of submissions, because not all ideas and proposals and concepts are the same. You know, one idea may be a low budget idea because it's more about, you know, developing a new assessment protocol, for example. Our approach. Another may be a more robust, it's an advanced material solution that, you know, will produce these types of, capabilities, you know, and it might be on a higher, you know, budget amount. So, but that's the intent of the long range BAA, is to be flexible, allow that agility from the R&D community to work with us. I think the third point I'll make is that, and you opened up with this, and I'll reaffirm it, is that when you engage with us through the LRBA, we are considering that you are engaging us as a partner. You know, and as we work with you as a partner, you know, I think some of the issues and concerns that will come from the budget, from related to funding and budget levels, gets worked out as you work through the process. So you start with the white paper, you get selected and asked to conduct a virtual pitch. You make it through the virtual pitch, and you get invited to submit a full proposal. Throughout that process, we're engaging with you and providing you feedback that in turn helps you refine each submission you make through that 3-stage process. Because it's not just us giving you feedback, but you're also asking, have the opportunity to ask us questions throughout that process.
And for clarity, the feedback through the process is in the way of questions that are being asked, and the conversation where we're can't provide guidance. So
correct.
Just want to make sure I'm setting the expectations of folks submitting. All right. Thank you so much. I have one more question before we start going out to audience questions. So just, you know, high dreams, big ideas, end state. What would be ideal scenario from, and call doing this LRBAA topic a success?
So I think you know, we could put an easy success measure in saying that, you know, if some of the technologies that we invested in through this LRBA were successful, and they were able to produce a modest improvement in the effectiveness of our adaptation and resilience investments that we're making across the U.S. government over the next 10 years, then that would result in not just a significant decrease in exposure, disasters exposure, meaning, you know, more risk reduction, but it would also result in a significant savings in terms of billions of dollars. But more importantly, the key result would be less disaster suffering. And that's what we really hope to accomplish. Even if just one of our technologies is truly successful, makes it through, gets implemented and commercialized, and it saves lives and makes our mission more effective, then we will have been successful with this LRBA.
Fantastic. That's a great goal. That's a great goal. I love it. All right, so we're going to go to audience questions, and we'll be able to take a few based on time. But I want to, while you're submitting those, make sure you have a chance to submit them. I'll tell you how you can find this topic, and I think we have a graphic to be able to help that. Great, because I don't have all those things memorized. All right, so visit our portal. If you can't remember this right here now, and it's harder, so just baa.dhs.gov, and then it'll take you to a page where you can click on LRBAA. Once you get to the LRBAA page, you're going to click on funding and then select open funding opportunities, and then this page that we're showing a sample of right here, it will show up, and under research area, you'll select managing incidents. Then you'll scroll down, it'll look like the topics will look like what's shown on the bottom of this page, and you'll look for MGMT 0805. From there, there'll be a button to click to say you want to do a submission. If you haven't registered your company yet, you'll register your company and you can submit your 3-page white paper and quad chart as the initial submission. I will note there's no due date for the initial submissions under the LRBA. If the topic is open, if it's under the LRBA and it shows up there, then you can initiate that that proposal submission process. All right, so I do want to try to take a couple questions, and I think I saw some showing up in the chat. So first one, please talk in detail about infrastructure. What are the key concerns and needs that DHS is looking to address? I don't know if you have additional thoughts. I know you touched on infrastructure in there a lot, but.
Yeah, I mean, I gave a few examples around the water infrastructure sector. I mean, we're interested in solutions that can help us adapt those systems to better cope with these changing and emerging conditions. And we know that those systems are experiencing different levels of exposure. There's also gaps in terms of our understanding of the level of exposure for those systems and the implications of potential solutions to mitigate. There are opportunities, like I said, to look at potentially proposing new ways to do more effective risk assessment across infrastructure sectors. I mentioned that intersection between water and energy. There's a growing convergence between infrastructure sectors. So, if energy gets disrupted, then water and other utilities are disrupted. Vice versa. Some cases, if water infrastructure is disrupted, then other critical services. So there's a lot of opportunity areas there. And then there's the more material type output opportunities, where we're trying to look at ways that we know we can't move the infrastructure. We know that the infrastructure is going to be exposed, but are there ways that we can do more informed adaptive management or implement more adaptive solutions that help that infrastructure, whether it's natural or built, meaning gray. It could be gray, green, or blue infrastructure, right? Ocean infrastructure to deal with this changing threat landscape.
Thank you. So the next one is interesting, and I think it might be a combined answer here. We might have to collaborate on this. Is can LRBAA include vulnerability testing to identify systems and component deficiencies? So to me, I want to put out that when we're talking about can it do T&E? Yes, T&E can fall under there, but it can't be a, hey, bring us your components and we'll tell you what vulnerabilities they are. That's not what that would be under support services. So do you have thoughts on vulnerability testing to identify systems and component deficiencies in ways that it may be able to apply under the LRBA?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I don't think the topic is appropriate if you're trying to solicit the department to perform test and evaluation services on infrastructure. That being said, if you have a new approach to doing vulnerability assessment and you would like to demonstrate that and test that approach against a variety of infrastructure systems and environments, then that would be an appropriate opportunity because you're proposing or you're looking to propose a new way of doing business and practice within the department.
Or even if you have a new way of doing it and you want to do the T&E part and
right.
you want us to help fund it, then yes, we can do T&E
and
in that.
Right. And that gets to, you have a prototype and you want us to help prove out that your prototype is viable for Homeland Security mission space.
Yes. All right. There's two more, but given time, I'm just going to answer them quickly. Do we provide feedback on unaccepted white papers? No, we don't provide feedback on that. And then there's can you please talk about the structure of the white paper? We purposely keep it unstructured. We're looking for this to be a low lift for you guys. So we're not trying to dictate how, and given the vast differences of what can come to us, we do not have a structure for that white paper. All right. Thank you so much. That was a lot of information. And I'm so happy that we were able to bring that to folks. I appreciate your time, David. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Final thoughts for?
No, I mean, it's always great to engage the larger stakeholder community and the science and R&D community and be able to discuss and share with them our thinking behind, key investments and areas of research priority, and encourage that they collaborate and partner with us. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to support this webinar.
Thank you. If all of that information was too much for one go round, don't worry. We recorded this session. We will be posting it to our YouTube channel. If you want to sign up to join our listserv, we have some key resources and I can tell you how to get there. So our key websites, the baa.dhs.gov that I mentioned earlier, will take you to our portal page. And from there, there's a video that provides more detail on the LRBAA process. I went over it high level, but you can see something there. We also have the LRBAA Today webinar series. This is where the current ones, or not current, the previous ones are that have now been posted. This one will be up once we are able to get it 508 compliant. Then there's the OIP portal, and going there, you'll have opportunity to see multiple programs or agency website and about how to do business with DHS. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you go to the portal website and you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a place that says you can sign up for our listserv. If you put that information in there, when we get the recording ready and have it posted, we will send out an email so you'll know how to go back and catch all those elements that David talked about that you might have missed, and it'll remind you to look up low head dams and orphan dams, I think were the two things I'm going to go look up. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us and hope to see you at the next episode.